The original 1978 Halloween movie is very dear to me. I watch it every year or so around this time. Made on a shoestring budget of only $325,000, the actors and even the director, John Carpenter, were unknowns at this time. The iconic Michael Myers mask was a William Shatner mask, painted fishbelly white and purchased for a mere $1. One single dollar, and we can still recognize it even today. It just goes to show you that a film, no matter the budget, no matter the star power, can truly change the world and ignite the fuse on a whole genre of filmmaking. Halloween made nearly $70 million at the box office, making it one of the most successful indie films to date. Of course, many people won't find the original Halloween quite as scary as they did back in 1978. Adjusted for inflation, Michael Myers would have to kill at least 20 to 30 more people to have an impact on the young horror fans of today. But I still think it's a great little horror film that's incredibly self-aware. Halloween knew that the audience knew that they were watching a horror film. The film pioneered the horror movie fake-out trope, adding musical stings and surprises to very normal day-to-day events, building up the tension for the eventual release when Michael Myers begins his killing spree. They also built tension by showing Michael on the fringes of regular everyday events, as if to say, hey, don't get too comfortable, a monster is lurking. So, by the time Michael kills his first victim, it's almost like a moment of catharsis for the audience. Michael Myers, or the Shape as he's credited, described as a force of nature, but I look at him more like a child. An inhumanly strong child that has no conception of the way the world works, or about the very precepts that underpin our society. This is seen in one of my favorite scenes in the original film. Michael has just killed a teenager, pinning his dead body up against the wall. He then tilts his head like a dog would, trying to understand what it was that he's just done, but he just simply cannot grasp it. And that's where the horror of Michael Myers comes from. He's emotionless, completely amoral, and kills for reasons that he himself does not understand. He just cannot understand that killing is wrong, a concept that's completely lost on him. He kills humans the same way a child would step on an ant, for the sole reason that something is terribly broken in his brain. The remorseless, emotionless killer terrorizing a group of teenagers from a small suburban town, just going about their lives, struck a chord with American audiences. Probably in part due to the prolific serial killers of the era, like the Son of Sam. The Confession of John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown, came out only a couple of months after the release of Halloween. These events and the collective fear of Americans served in favor of Halloween's financial success and the slasher genre of horror as a whole. Cut to 40 years later and the Halloween franchise is rebooted again. However, unlike the 2007 Rob Zombie reboot, this one would be different. Originally called Halloween Returns, the production had a few issues, the funniest of which is that the studio insisted on shooting the film in Serbia instead of the United States. Malik Akkad shot this idea down because Serbia is definitely not a good fit to film a movie set in small-town Illinois. It was very apparent going into production that the two writers, Danny McBride and David Gordon Green, were die-hard fans of the original. Not in the way that Kevin Smith claims to be a fan of He-Man or Kathleen Kennedy claims to be a fan of Star Wars, but real, actual fans. They wrote the script with the express purpose of presenting it to John Carpenter and would move ahead with production only with his blessing. Carpenter liked the script so much that he took an active interest in the film, saying, and I quote, "They get it." The writers also focused their efforts into writing the Laurie Strode character in such a way that Jamie Lee Curtis would want to come on board as well. However, despite wanting to pay homage to the first film, the production team did not look upon the sequels with quite as much admiration. Danielle Harris, who played Laurie Strode's daughter in Halloween 4 and 5, did ask to reprise her role in some way, but was denied by the studio. She also didn't want Laurie to have a daughter who wasn't Jamie Lloyd, but those pleas fell on deaf ears. Aside from that one hiccup, I think this is perhaps one of the best cases of remaking a franchise to date. The filmmakers were fans, and they faithfully recreated Michael Myers according to the original vision of John Carpenter. They attempted to make it different enough so that it doesn't feel like a shot-for-shot remake like the 1998 Psycho with Vince Vaughn was. The filmmakers opted not to spit upon the fans like so many other reboots and remakes seem to do these days. In the end, while the film was faithful to the source material, it left something to be desired. And don't get me wrong, I don't think the original 1978 Halloween is a perfect film either. It had some goofy moments, like Loomis screaming at kids from the bushes, or Laurie Strode dropping the knife not once, but twice. But Halloween 2018 was a bit less tightly written compared to the original. Ranbir Sartain, the new Loomis, driving Michael out to Laurie Strode's house, and her granddaughter running through the woods just to get to Laurie's house, felt very clunky. Like the movie wanted to move the pieces to Laurie's house, but didn't quite know how to get that to happen. Act 1 and Act 2 of the film were its strong points, but Act 3 felt quite a bit contrived. I didn't quite appreciate the self-referential moments either, like a kid telling Laurie's granddaughter that Michael killing like 3 kids in 1978 wasn't quite as scary nowadays. These meta-acknowledgements and strange inspirations Halloween 2018 took from the Rob Zombie films weren't great. The film ends where Halloween Kills begins, a wounded Michael trapped in Laurie Strode's house as it burns down. Halloween Kills is set in 2018 and takes place on the same night as the previous film. After a quick set of scenes that show that Officer Hawkins is still alive, a flashback sequence takes us back to 1978, just after the events of the original film. A young Hawkins and his partner track Michael down to the old Myers house, and he inadvertently shoots his partner in the neck, passing it off as another kill by Michael. Loomis makes another appearance here, voiced by a sound-alike and played by the art director, Tom Jones Jr. Curiously, they used no CGI for this, but instead only used prosthetics and clever lighting to achieve the look of the late Donald Pleasence. In Halloween 2018, they used the same sound-alike, Colin Mahan, but were smart enough to have Loomis's voice come through an old tape recording. That way, the differences in their voices could be disguised through distortion. In Halloween Kills, however, they have no such distortion. So, while the voice seems somewhat like Loomis, it's clearly ADR'd and unnatural. Back on Halloween night 2018, we see a talent show in a dive bar where Tommy Doyle talks about the survivors of Michael Myers in 1978. Is there such a thing as being too reverent to the source material? Because this would be it. This is the second time in 2 movies they've referenced the original 3 kills of Michael back in 1978. Meanwhile, Laurie Strode is being rushed to the hospitals as firefighters attempt to put out the fire at her house. Michael Myers promptly kills a firefighter and steals his Halligan bar. A Halligan bar is a tool used by firefighters for breaching houses. It consists of a claw, a blade, and a tapered pig. He leaves the house and we get a schlocky action scene where Michael takes on a bunch of firefighters attacking him with their breaching axes. It's not good. At this point, I'm starting to have a bad feeling about this film, because this isn't what Halloween is about. The scene doesn't work because it is still Halloween night, and people walking around wearing masks for this night is pretty normal. For all these firefighters know, Michael Myers hasn't been seen for 40 years. Their first reaction as first responders, even if he looks ominous, should have been to see if he needed help, not to heft their axes and attack him. We, the audience, know who he is, but the firefighters don't, or at least they shouldn't. It's bad writing because the firefighters are written as though they're the audience and not just regular people in the Halloween universe. Cut to Laurie Strode getting surgery for her stab wound, which means she'll be sitting out the rest of the film, never leaving the hospital. The news of Michael going on a rampage finally reaches the dive bar, and the patrons begin to panic. They see a man in one of their cars and immediately assume it's Michael Myers. So they form a mob to fight Michael, but it turns out it's one of the other escaped inmates. We're treated to one of the cringiest dialogues in the film.
Swing on Huckleberry here. Say night-night.
It's like straight out of a B-movie. A group of people, including Allison's cheating boyfriend, decide to take up arms against Michael and hunt him down. And then the silliest shit happens. Allison places a bloody knife wrapped in a towel next to Laurie Strode's head while she's in an induced coma. Almost definitely tongue-in-cheek about the way she threw her knife away twice in the 1978 film. The group splits up into pods of a few people, and one of the pods comes up on Michael Myers, and they redo this scene from the original film again. Fun fact about this scene: the cast and crew didn't have the money to get sugar glass or breakaway glass, so they had to shatter a car's actual window. In order to make that happen, they taped a painted wrench to the actor's hand. If you go frame by frame and look closely, you can see it. In this film, it's just another reference in a sea of references to Halloween 1978. After killing the people in the car, a woman tries to shoot Michael, missing every time. Michael kicks the car door, hitting her gun, and she shoots herself in the head. I'm reminded of the scene in the Shane Black Predator film where Olivia Munn shoots herself in the foot with a tranq dart. At this point, the film is devolving into pure farce. It's like Michael Myers in the Three Stooges bit. There's a weird arc around here where Laurie's awake in her bed and doesn't know that Michael's still alive. There's multiple scenes of her just gloating that she killed Michael, and it goes on for far too long, and it has no impact on the audience because we know he's still alive. It just feels like a bunch of wasted runtime. A riot begins in the hospital because the inmate from the fake out scene shows up, and the whole town thinks he's Michael for practically no reason. The inmate eventually jumps out the window and kills himself. I think this is supposed to be some kind of commentary on mob mentality, and they even say out loud that Michael's turning the town into monsters. I was quite okay with this bit. It's not farcical, it shows a natural reaction of a town riled up and ready for action, an outpouring of a mass of collective fear and rage towards an unintended target. For all this film's flaws, this part was pretty good. The next revelation is pretty good too. Laurie Strode is under the impression that Michael and her are somehow linked by fate, that if he should die, she should die too. The film shuts her down very quickly. Officer Hawkins saying that Michael doesn't care about her, and that it's never been about her, and that Dr. Sartain drove Michael out to her house in the first film. In this narrative context, that bit of silly writing in Halloween 2018 is given a wee bit more depth. Hawkins also confirms my theory about Michael Myers here.
He's a 6-year-old boy with the strength of a man and the mind of an animal.
A group of hunters, yeah, let's call them that, figure out Michael's movements. After killing, he goes straight back home like a child that's done playing. The film ends with the hunters trapping Michael and beating the shite out of him. But of course he gets back up and kills the bunch of them, because we still have one more film to get through before this group of filmmakers will retire Michael Myers, and Laurie Strode needs to have something to do with his death. Halloween Kills is not very good at all, and it lacks almost all of the horror elements that made the original great. And really, how could it? It's essentially Act 4, 5, and 6 of Halloween 2018, with ramped up gore and what amounts to action scenes. Of course, they increased the number of people Michael killed from Halloween 2018, just like most sequels do. Judy Greer even said that they had a blood station on set, which shows us just how much more gore they had in this compared to its predecessors. But that's missing the point, isn't it? Halloween 1978 was practically bloodless for a horror film. The fear of Michael Myers doesn't come with just how brutally he kills his victims or turns their heads into jack-o'-lanterns. They fell into the same trap that a lot of horror sequels fall into, constantly chasing higher highs in order to recapture the audience and outdo their previous work. Halloween Kills references the original film so much that it becomes tiring. Practically all the iconic moments are either referenced or done again. The soundtrack was sparsely used. The classic musical stings were barely present, and even though John and Cody Carpenter did the soundtrack for this film as well, it feels like it lacks the artistic drive that made Halloween 2018's soundtrack so great. The whole film feels like the production team were running on autopilot, just going through the motions. In the end, Halloween Kills is a film without purpose. The production team wanted to wait for the reviews and performance of Halloween 2018 before getting to work on sequels, and it's very apparent they had no plans for the film at all. The story is a mess, a bloated addition to the previous film, and it ends predictably. This saddens me because I love Michael Myers, and they've done a good job of portraying him in the way John Carpenter envisioned him. A childlike, emotionless killer, driven by forces we will never know or understand. But he finds himself in a film that is aimless filler, meant to bridge the gap between Halloween 2018 and Halloween Ends, a film for which I no longer hold out any hope for.